The night. Everything changed. The red and blue lights carved violent patterns across 7-year-old Maya's bedroom wall as she screamed for her mother. Her small hands clutched the torn pages of Goodnight Moon, while boots thundered up the staircase. "Get down! Get down now!" The voices were harsh, unfamiliar, terrifying. This was not how Tuesday nights were supposed to end in the quiet suburb of Maplewood Heights. 12 hours earlier, Amara Hassan had been folding laundry in the same bedroom, humming an old Sudanese lullaby her grandmother taught her decades ago. The September afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains, casting gentle shadows on family photographs lining the dresser. Her husband David's police academy graduation photo sat beside their wedding picture, both images capturing moments of pure joy and possibility. David worked as a software engineer downtown, commuting an hour each way to provide for his family. Amara taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, where Maya would join her colleagues' children next year. Their son Omar, 15, played varsity soccer and maintained a 3.8 GPA, despite the challenges of being one of only 3 black students in his class. "Mom, can I go to Jake's house after practice?" Omar had asked that morning, stuffing his soccer cleats into a worn duffel bag. His voice carried the confidence of a teenager who believed the world held endless possibilities. "Be home by 8, Amara replied, kissing his forehead. "We're having your favorite tonight." She meant her grandmother's lamb stew, slow-cooked with cardamom and cinnamon until the meat fell off the bone. The Hassan family had lived at 1247 Elm Street for 3 years, ever since David's promotion allowed them to escape their cramped apartment downtown. They chose Maplewood Heights for its excellent schools and tree-lined streets where children rode bicycles without fear. The mortgage stretched their budget thin, but they believed in investing in their children's future. Their neighbor, Karen Whitmore, lived in the larger colonial house next door, separated by a property line that had become increasingly contentious over recent months. Karen, a divorced real estate agent in her mid-40s, possessed the particular brand of confidence that comes from never being told no. Her platinum blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her manicured nails filed to sharp points. "That hedge is clearly on my property," Karen had declared the previous weekend, pointing at the row of boxwood shrubs that had grown along their shared fence for over a decade. "I'm having it surveyed." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of will. David had remained diplomatic. "We can work this out neighborly. Karen, maybe we could split the cost of a proper survey." His engineering mind sought logical solutions, not understanding that logic held no currency in Karen's world. "Those people think they can just move into our neighborhood and change everything," Karen had muttered to her friend Linda at the grocery store checkout line. Her words dripped with the casual racism that thrived in coded language and meaningful glances. The first real confrontation occurred on a humid Thursday evening in late August. Omar was practicing free kicks in their backyard when Karen stormed across the property line, her face flushed with indignation. "That ball keeps landing in my garden," she shrieked, holding a soccer ball like evidence in a criminal trial. "You're damaging my prize-winning roses." Amara emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Karen, I'm sure Omar didn't mean any harm. Boys will be boys, right?" She offered her most diplomatic smile, the one she used with difficult parents during conference meetings. "Don't patronize me," Karen snapped. "Some of us take pride in our property values." Her eyes swept dismissively over the Hassan's modest landscaping, noting every imperfection with practiced disdain. Omar, tall for his age, but still possessing a teenager's awkwardness, stepped forward. "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll be more careful." His apology was genuine, tinged with the embarrassment that comes from unwanted attention. "You'll stay off my property entirely," Karen declared, her finger jabbing the air dangerously close to Omar's chest. "And keep your foreign music down. Some of us work for a living." The confrontations escalated steadily over the following weeks. Karen complained to the Homeowners Association about loud gatherings when the Hassans hosted Omar's soccer team for pizza. She called the city about suspicious odors emanating from their kitchen during Amara's weekend cooking sessions. Each complaint was meticulously documented, building a paper trail of manufactured grievances. "She called the police about our barbecue last Sunday," David told his brother over the phone one evening. His voice carried a weariness that came from fighting battles he never chose. "Said we were disturbing the peace. It was 3 in the afternoon." The property line dispute intensified when Karen hired a surveyor who confirmed what everyone already knew. The hedge sat squarely on the boundary between their lots. Karen's response was to demand the Hassans remove half the vegetation at their own expense, threatening legal action if they refused. "This is harassment," Amara said, reviewing Karen's latest certified letter. Her teacher's training had taught her to recognize bullying in all its forms, but she'd never imagined facing it as an adult in her own home. David considered hiring an attorney, but the consultation fee alone would strain their budget. "Maybe we should just comply," he suggested reluctantly. "Keep the peace until we can afford to move." But moving wasn't an option. Not with Maya finally settled in her new school and Omar thriving on the soccer team. This was their home, their piece of the American dream, and they refused to be driven away by one woman's bigotry. Karen's campaign reached new heights of pettiness when she installed motion sensor floodlights aimed directly at the Hassan's bedroom windows. The blazing illumination turned every nighttime movement into a theatrical production, transforming simple acts like taking out trash into spotlight performances. "Daddy, why is Mrs. Whitmore so angry at us?" Maya asked one evening, her 7-year-old mind struggling to understand adult cruelty. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, held a confusion that broke David's heart. "Some people are just unhappy, sweetheart," he replied, not knowing how to explain racial prejudice to someone who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in early September. Omar was at soccer practice, and Maya was upstairs reading, while Amara and David discussed their mortgage refinancing options at the kitchen table. The conversation was mundane, domestic, utterly ordinary. Next door, Karen was drinking her third glass of wine and scrolling through social media posts about terrorism and immigration. The algorithm fed her fears and prejudices, confirming biases she'd harbored for years. Her finger hovered over her phone's keypad as she watched the Hassan family's silhouettes move past their windows. "They're probably planning something," she muttered to herself, the wine and accumulated resentment clouding her judgment. All those people coming and going, those strange smells, that foreign music. Each observation twisted in her mind until innocent activities became sinister evidence. Karen's call to 911 was made at exactly 8:47 p.m. The dispatcher's voice was professional, trained to remain calm during emergencies. 911. "What's your emergency?" "I need to report suspicious terrorist activity," Karen said, her words slightly slurred, but her conviction absolute. "My neighbors are harboring dangerous individuals. I've seen people coming and going at all hours. They're planning something." "Ma'am, what specific activity have you witnessed?" "They have meetings, loud foreign music, strange cooking smells. The teenage boy acts aggressive. I think they're making bombs or something." Karen's imagination transformed Omar's soccer ball into evidence of extremist training. Amara's spice collection into chemical weapons ingredients. The dispatcher, trained to take all terrorism reports seriously, began coordinating a response. Within minutes, patrol units were speeding toward Elm Street, their radios crackling with urgent communications. The word terrorist triggered protocols designed for maximum force and minimum risk to law enforcement. At 9:15 p.m., the Hassan family's quiet evening exploded into chaos. The front door splintered under the force of a tactical entry, sending wooden fragments across the hardwood floor. Armed officers in tactical gear swarmed through the house, their weapons drawn and ready. Everybody on the ground. Now, now, now. The commands came from multiple directions, overwhelming and terrifying. David instinctively moved to shield Amara as red laser dots danced across their chests. "We have children!" Amara screamed, her voice breaking with terror and desperation. "Please, we have children upstairs." The officers weren't interested in explanations. David found himself face down on his own kitchen floor, zip-tie restraints cutting into his wrists, while boots trampled the homework Amara had been grading. The domestic tranquility they'd built over 3 years was destroyed in 30 seconds. Upstairs, Maya's bedroom door burst open as she cowered under her princess blanket. The tactical flashlight beam blinded her tiny eyes as hands roughly pulled her from bed. Her stuffed elephant, a gift from her grandmother, fell to the floor and was trampled by heavy boots. "Mommy, mommy, I want my mommy!" Her screams echoed through the house, mixing with her parents' protests and the officers' shouted commands. The sound was primal, heartbreaking, the cry of absolute terror from someone too young to understand why this was happening. The search was systematic and destructive. Officers tore through closets, dumped drawers, and examined every book, photograph, and personal item for signs of terrorist activity. Amara's teaching materials were scattered across the living room floor. David's computer was seized along with their tablets, phones, and any device capable of storing information. "Where are the weapons?" demanded Lieutenant Rodriguez, his face inches from David's as they sat handcuffed in their own living room. "Who else is involved in your cell?" "We're not terrorists," David said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. His police academy training, though decades old, reminded him to remain calm and compliant. "I work for TechFlow Solutions downtown. My wife teaches 3rd grade. We're Americans." "Born here?" Rodriguez's question carried implications that made David's stomach clench with recognition. This wasn't about evidence or reasonable suspicion. This was about assumptions based on skin color and surnames. "I was born in Detroit," David replied. "My wife came here legally from Sudan when she was 12. We're citizens. We vote. We pay taxes. Our son plays varsity soccer." Each fact felt like a plea for recognition of their humanity. The interrogation continued for over 2 hours, while the house was systematically destroyed. Kitchen cabinets were emptied, their contents examined for explosive materials. Amara's spice collection, inherited from her grandmother and carefully maintained over decades, was treated as potential chemical weapons. Cumin and cardamom pods scattered across the floor like evidence of some imagined plot. Maya sat in the corner, still in her pajamas, clutching a police officer's jacket someone had wrapped around her shoulders. Her dark eyes were wide with shock, no longer trusting the adults who were supposed to protect her. The trauma was immediate and visible, etching itself into her young mind with permanent precision. Omar arrived home at 9:45 p.m., his soccer bag slung over his shoulder and grass stains on his uniform. The sight of police cars lining his street sent ice through his veins. Neighbors stood on their porches, their faces reflecting varying degrees of shock, curiosity, and satisfaction. "That's the boy," Karen shouted from her front yard, pointing at Omar with theatrical urgency. "The aggressive one I told you about, he's probably carrying weapons in that bag." 3 officers tackled Omar before he could process what was happening. His 15-year-old body hit the sidewalk hard, scraping skin from his palms as dirty cleats and soccer balls spilled across the concrete. The bag that had contained dreams of athletic scholarships became evidence in an imaginary terrorism case. "Don't hurt him!" Amara's scream carried across the entire neighborhood as she watched her son's face pressed against the pavement. Maternal instinct overwhelmed all other considerations as she struggled against her restraints. The search yielded nothing. No weapons, no explosives, no terrorist materials. The most suspicious items discovered were David's collection of computer programming books and Amara's lesson plans about world cultures. The officers found a family living ordinary lives, pursuing ordinary dreams, harming no one. By 11:30 p.m., the tactical team was packing their equipment with obvious disappointment. The house looked like a war zone, with furniture overturned, belongings scattered, and holes in the drywall where they'd searched for hidden compartments. The damage would take months and thousands of dollars to repair. "Someone's going to pay for this," Lieutenant Rodriguez muttered as he reviewed the empty evidence bags. "False reports waste taxpayer money and endanger real operations." His anger wasn't directed at the Hassan family, but at whoever had sent them on this fruitless and destructive mission. The family huddled together in their destroyed living room, free but not safe, traumatized and trying to process what had just occurred. Maya refused to leave her parents' arms, her small body shaking with residual fear. Omar stared at the floor, his teenage confidence shattered by the experience of being treated as a threat. "Why did this happen to us?" Amara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her teacher's training had never covered how to explain state-sanctioned violence to her own children. David's phone buzzed with messages from concerned neighbors and friends who'd seen the news coverage. The story was already spreading: terror raid in Maplewood Heights. Their family's trauma was becoming entertainment for the evening news cycle. The truth began emerging within days of the raid. Karen's 911 call was reviewed as part of standard procedure, and investigators quickly realized the complaints were baseless. Her description of suspicious activities matched normal family life, and her claims about weapons and explosives were completely fabricated. Detective Sarah Chen was assigned to investigate the false report. A 20-year veteran with experience in hate crimes, she recognized the patterns immediately. Karen's previous complaints to various city departments painted a clear picture of harassment based on racial prejudice. "Mrs. Whitmore," Detective Chen said during their interview 3 days later, "your allegations resulted in significant trauma to a family with young children. We need to understand why you made these claims." Karen sat in the police station interview room, her confidence considerably diminished. The wine had worn off, but her prejudices remained intact. "They don't belong in our neighborhood," she said defiantly. "Property values matter. Community standards matter." "What specific criminal activity did you witness?" Chen pressed. "Because that's what you reported. Terrorism." The music was loud. People came and went. The boy was aggressive. Karen's justification sounded increasingly hollow in the sterile interview room, recorded for potential prosecution. "You mean they had dinner guests, and their teenager played soccer?" Chen's voice carried the incredulity of someone who'd seen too many cases like this one. "Mrs. Whitmore, you've potentially committed several felonies." The community's reaction was swift and divided. Progressive neighbors organized meal trains and fundraising efforts for the Hassan family's recovery. Conservative residents questioned whether the police response was appropriate, but stopped short of condemning Karen's motives. The Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting for the following Thursday evening. The community center hadn't seen such attendance since the annual fall festival, with over 200 residents packing the main hall. The air was thick with tension and competing loyalties. Association President Janet Morrison struggled to maintain order as neighbors debated responsibility and consequences. "We need to address what happened and determine appropriate action regarding Mrs. Whitmore's continued membership," she announced, her voice carrying over the crowd's murmurs. David stood at the podium, his face still bearing scrapes from being forced to the ground. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of profound violation. "My family chose this neighborhood because we believed in the values you advertised: safety, community, respect for neighbors. We pay our dues, follow the rules, and contribute to local schools and charities." He continued, "My son volunteers at the senior center. My wife donates supplies to underfunded classrooms. We're not asking for special treatment, just basic human decency." Karen sat in the back row, surrounded by empty chairs as former friends maintained careful distance. Her defiance had crumbled over the past week as legal and social consequences mounted. The real estate agency where she worked had placed her on administrative leave pending the investigation. "I demand to speak." Karen stood abruptly, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Everyone's acting like I committed some terrible crime. I was protecting our community. How was I supposed to know they weren't dangerous?" The question hung in the air, exposing the prejudice underlying her actions. How was she supposed to know by talking to them, by observing their actual behavior, by applying the same presumption of innocence she'd expect for herself? Amara took the microphone next, her teacher's training helping her project calm authority despite her inner turmoil. "My 7-year-old daughter now has nightmares about police officers. She asks me every night if the bad people are coming back. How do I explain to a child that someone who'd never spoken to us decided we were enemies?" The audience was silent, absorbing the weight of a mother's pain. Several people wiped tears from their eyes as Amara described Maya's regression in school, her reluctance to sleep alone, her fear of loud noises. Omar's teammates' parents questioned whether he should remain on the soccer team. Amara continued, 15 years old, and he's already learning that excellence isn't enough to overcome suspicion. That's not the America we chose when we became citizens. The vote was overwhelmingly clear, 187 in favor, 23 opposed, with 12 abstentions. Karen Whitmore was expelled from the Homeowners Association, banned from all community events, and required to pay restitution for the Hassan family's damages. But the legal consequences were just beginning. The district attorney's office, facing public pressure and clear evidence of false reporting, filed multiple charges against Karen, filing a false police report, reckless endangerment of minors, and criminal harassment carried potential prison time. The Hassan family's civil lawsuit moved forward simultaneously. Attorney Michael Rodriguez, specializing in civil rights violations, took their case pro bono after seeing news coverage of the raid. "This represents everything wrong with assuming guilt based on prejudice," he told reporters. The discovery process revealed the extent of Karen's harassment campaign: emails to city officials, calls to the school district, and social media posts painting the Hassan family as threats created a documented pattern of malicious behavior. Her own words became evidence against her. Karen's criminal trial began 6 months later, drawing media attention and protesters from both sides. The courtroom was packed as prosecutors presented evidence of her false allegations and their devastating consequences on an innocent family. The defendant's actions represent domestic terrorism. Prosecutor Lisa Washington argued during closing statements. She weaponized law enforcement against neighbors whose only crime was existing, while different from her expectations. Karen's defense attorney attempted to portray her as a concerned citizen, making an honest mistake. But recorded phone calls and documented harassment made her motivations impossible to disguise. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Karen to 2 years in prison, suspended to 6 months with 3 years probation. Additional requirements included 400 hours of community service, mandatory diversity education classes, and financial restitution to the Hassan family. Your actions traumatized children and destroyed property based purely on racial prejudice. Judge Williams stated during sentencing, "This court will not tolerate vigilante justice disguised as community protection." The civil settlement reached $850,000, covering property damage, medical expenses for trauma counseling, legal fees, and punitive damages. Karen was forced to sell her house to meet the judgment, finally leaving the neighborhood she'd claimed to protect. 1 year later, the Hassan family remained on Elm Street. Their house had been repaired and redecorated, the physical damage erased even if psychological scars remained. Maya still sometimes woke with nightmares, but therapy was helping her process the trauma. Omar had been recruited by 3 colleges for soccer scholarships, his athletic talent overcoming the suspicion that had briefly threatened his future. He spoke at school assemblies about prejudice and resilience, turning his painful experience into education for others. David and Amara became reluctant advocates for criminal justice reform, working with organizations to prevent similar incidents. Their testimony before the state legislature helped pass laws requiring additional verification before terrorism-related raids. The neighborhood had changed too. New residents included a diverse mix of families who'd chosen Maplewood Heights, specifically because of how the community had ultimately rallied around the Hassan family. Property values actually increased as the area gained reputation for standing against discrimination. On quiet evenings, when Maya read her bedtime stories and Omar practiced free kicks in the backyard, the Hassan family found peace in the home they'd refused to abandon. The hedge along their property line grew thick and green, no longer a source of conflict, but a symbol of boundaries respected and maintained. Their story spread beyond Maplewood Heights, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudice and the importance of community solidarity. But for the Hassan family, the real victory was simpler: the right to live safely in their chosen home, pursuing their dreams without fear of false accusations or manufactured outrage. The American dream they'd invested in had been tested and nearly broken, but ultimately proved stronger than one person's hatred. In choosing to stay and fight rather than flee, they'd not only secured justice for themselves, but created a safer, more welcoming community for future families who might face similar challenges.